How do you beat the Arctic with minimum supplies? Well, in the movie Arctic, exactly this is the case. A man named Overgard is stranded hundreds of miles away from civilization, somewhere in the middle of the Arctic tundra with no one around and only minimal chance of Arcticuno coming for rescue. He has minimal supplies, fights for survival every single day, and polar bears are a thing as well. Well, let's find out how to beat the Arctic by following our character on his journey of survival. Let's go. The initial scenes of this movie give us a straightforward start. No time is wasted on hows and whens and whys, and we go straight to our protagonist Overgard, who is digging a large SOS sign into the snow. His appearance and initial scenes show that he has been stranded for a good few weeks already. However, we don't get much more than that on how he's stranded. But from the damaged fuselage, we can guess that he is here because of a plane crash that he seems to have survived. Those who were with him have probably already died, or perhaps he had already eaten them. However, that is rather unlikely the case for reasons that we will soon get to understand. But all of this are just guesses and don't add anything to his survival at this point. This is a story all about a lone warrior who must use his resourcefulness in the deadly cold of the most northern part of Earth. The question is, what is the best food source in this deserted landscape? Well, animals, of course. You see, fat, sneezing seals are not just cute, but also make for a good winter snack. They, together with penguins and fish, store lots of good fats and proteins in their bodies, ideal for their survival and ours. In fall 2022, one of our last videos, a character opted for eating vulture meat, which, after researching, came out to be highly toxic and would do more harm than good. Now, penguins too are known to carry lots of parasites and infectious diseases, yet after some hardcore, in-depth research, it turns out penguin meat is completely safe. Now, Overgard can only catch fish here, as there is no trace of any other animal in his vicinity. He creates a semi-automatic pulley-like fishing mechanism which he collects his food with. Pretty ingenious and probably not something a normal person can pull off, pun intended. However, having fish available is a huge benefit, and due to the low temperatures, you don't need to worry about anything going bad over time. It is clear that he is way more skilled in surviving this environment than you and I. Therefore, he is the best guy, in my opinion, from whom we can learn how to beat the Arctic. Overgard takes his fresh hunt into his makeshift cabin and eats it raw. He does have a knife, which is great, but you could also just use about any other sharp object to gut the fish. The important thing here is you must gut the fish, because the guts and skin may contain toxins and make you sick. They are not likely to kill you, but being sick up here under those circumstances could be a death sentence. Now, after securing food and shelter, the next thing you should look out for is something to communicate or send signals out with. Your electronic devices might not work or connect with any signals in this remote area. Therefore, a satellite beacon would literally be your ticket out. And I guess, to be honest, everyone daring to go into such a harsh place would carry one with them. However, if you don't, and you're stranded because of a vehicle accident or a plane crash like our protagonist, there must be a radio device installed. As for Overgard, he found a radio signaling device which he uses every single day to send out signals. Gives me flashbacks to I Am Legend. He seems to be doing this for quite some time already, because if you notice, he has created a map with all the routes that he has tried to pick up signals at, which is a very clever way of going about things. You see, wasting your energy without progress is a death sentence, and taking notes about what works and what doesn't is a winner strategy, so huge thumbs up for that. Until now, Overgard's strategies have been working well. But one day, he notices fresh footmarks of a polar bear nearby. If you haven't freaked out by now, this is a time to reminisce about the last Joe Rogan podcast you've listened to.
You're dead!
It's trying to, it wanted to get its teeth through it.
Bro, when it's opening its mouth, that's a monster's mouth.
Well, let's start with fighting these animals. That's a no-go. They will rip you apart like baboons and would eat your guts with you staring down thinking you were stuck in the wrong movie. Overgard runs away, which is the best thing to do, and aborts today's mission. After Overgard realizes that the bear has gone away, he resumes his daily routine. The next day, he tries to find a signal again, like every other day, for probably a few more weeks. But this time, he is lucky. He witnesses a helicopter approaching, and visions of a hot bath, Chinese takeout, and dirty on-demand TV channels somewhere in a hotel room hijack his brain. But seconds later, the helicopter loses control and crashes to the ground and crushes his semi-wet dreams. He rushes towards the chopper and finds that the pilot has died, but a woman, severely injured though, is still alive. He notices a deep injury in her abdomen, reacts quickly, and staples her wound. The first thing one should do after seeing the open wound, obviously, is try to stop the bleeding, unless you prepare for a meal. Fortunately, Overgard has already eaten today and has access to a metal stapler. But if you're stranded, it is highly unlikely that you will find any medical gadgets. So anything able to imitate a tourniquet, like a belt, scarf, shirt sleeves, a rope, or even a bandana would do an okay job. Your main concern is the blood loss, obviously, because, one more time, the body temperatures rapidly decrease if a hemorrhage occurs, which obviously accelerates hypothermia, which is a likely risk anyway up here. Now, taking care of the woman, Overgard stays with the woman for a while in the helicopter before dragging her to his hideout. This woman has inadvertently come with a few gifts like food, a lighter, and a sledge, and maybe even a little bit of luck, as this time he catches a large trout using his fish lines. After taking her to his shelter or cabin, whatever you want to call it, he hugs her gently. This, my friends, is the power of the human touch. While doing this, he has nothing in mind, right? No emotions, nothing whatsoever, but he has just craved to feel the warmth of another human. You might consider this a small detail in this movie, but this gives an important lesson. Being stranded completely on your own is completely different than having another person with you. Maybe you ask why? Man, now you have a freaking person to take care of as well. Why not just look out for yourself? Well, sticking to each other in grave conditions not only increases the chance of survival, because you can back each other up, but also keeps you mentally sane. I mean, who wants to escape 100 deaths before making it back to society only to find out that you have gone crazy? Well, see? There you go. So back in the shelter, and once she has recovered to some extent, Overgard tries to communicate with her, but she doesn't seem to understand. So to make sure that she is alert, he asks her to squeeze his hand to prove that she is. Now, what is important here is that he seems to understand that he must communicate with her by any means. Not only is she the first person he interacts with in weeks, but she's also the only one who could have any information that could benefit them and perhaps even rescue them. Now, Overgard uses the lighter that he found to light the stove. This means that he already had the gas supply, but didn't have anything to light the stove with. So for the first time in weeks, he feels the warmth and comfort a fire brings. Notes to myself, even though some tools might not be useful today, they might be useful tomorrow, so holding on to them might just be the right way to go. Along with the other essential supplies, he also finds a picture of the woman and the pilot together with their child. He places the picture near to her, knowing that emotional support during a fight for survival can cause a miracle. Other than the picture, Overgard also finds a map of the area, which by far is the most valuable thing he finds, even more precious than the lighter itself, if you ask me. It is literally the turning point in his story. He locates where they are and finds a seasonal base just a few kilometers away from the shelter. Now he needs to decide whether to stay safe and wait for help to come, or take the risk and walk all the way to the base. What would you do? I mean, there are three options here, right? Either wait it out and hope that you will be rescued, wait and have the woman recover and make the journey together, or make the journey alone and hope for the woman to stay alive until we can come back with appropriate help. Well, in my opinion, since he has survived quite successfully until now, I don't see a reason why to rush things. Not only has he found a companion who gives him strength, but also a lighter that makes survival a whole lot easier. Now eventually he decides to wait for now, but is convinced otherwise once the woman's condition worsens. He takes the risk, packs whatever he can find for the journey, puts the woman into a sleeping bag, straps her to the sled, and starts the risky adventure. I am not sure if bringing her along is the best option for either of them, because it will be more taxing, more dangerous, and especially a much longer journey than going alone. But let us have a look what happens next. So as he trudges onwards, dragging his companion into the direction of the base, his energy level decreases rapidly. He is eventually even forced to dig a shelter into the snow and makes a temporary hideout, which is genius and obviously something you have to do, well, stay in an environment like this for multiple weeks. You see, snow is one of nature's amazing products. Despite its coldness, it can be used to insulate in sub-freezing environments to keep out wind. While it may seem counterintuitive, this hideout will keep you warm, as the snow around you stops heat from being transferred to the outside and again stops wind from entering. Think about igloos, it's basically the same concept. So now, after resting for a while and fueling his and the woman's body by eating food, he continues a journey. He moves slowly but steadily through the snowy wilderness until the next bummer comes along. A steep slope that he couldn't identify on the map before he started this journey. He climbs up on top to see what lays ahead and finds a super smooth path after it. However, he fails to hoist the woman up and is left with no other choice than to take the long route around it, which, to be honest, sucks and is pretty much a reason of why it would have been better to take the journey alone. Make no mistake, circling this slope adds 2 to 3 more days to the journey until they reach the base, which can almost be a death sentence on its own. Despite all these insanities, Overgard seems to overcome them with remarkable resilience, at least until they face off a polar bear. Thanks. Yep, just when things could not get any worse, this happens. I imagine an aggressive polar bear snarling and squeezing its head through the small entrance where you have taken shelter. What would you do? If you have a deodorant, then how about giving that beast a slight torch? Now, having obviously no deodorant available, Overgard uses the next best thing, light flares. He scares off the bear and is safe for now. Now, it's safe to assume that anybody who would venture into this environment, into the Arctic, right, would probably bring along light flares. I think that's pretty basic items to carry with. But on the other hand, you could make also the claim that satellite phones or GPS beacons would also be common things to have, which he doesn't, obviously. Anyway, he somehow saves them from the bear, but little did he know that another misadventure is waiting for him. When he starts the journey again, he faces a severe snowstorm that hinders them from moving further. He uses the sled as a shield from the torrential winds and lies inside the sleeping bag with the woman to stay warm. As the blizzard slowly comes to an end, he continues the risky trek. Suddenly, he senses something not quite pleasant under his gloves, removes them, and sees that the cold has started to affect him. His fingers become frostbitten. Now, what most people don't know is that frostbite can be lethal in some cases. In fact, there are 3 stages that one might recognize to avoid further tissue damage. The early frostbite only affects the top layers of the skin. This is nothing that won't heal, so no problem there. However, the next stages reach down to the muscles and eventually even straight down to the bones. Amputations are not uncommon for people who are forced to sleep outside in the blistering colds for multiple nights. At this point, however, Overgard starts to lose hope. I would have lost hope way back already. I would have probably already died, but well, this guy, he's legit. The woman's condition also worsens, and she doesn't seem responsive anymore. Although she is still alive but unconscious, he decides to leave her behind and continue by himself. You gotta do what you gotta do, my friends. To many, abandoning her seems like a selfish act, but you know how it goes. Only the strongest survive. But it would have been better to just leave her back in the shelter, make the journey alone, and come back with help as soon as possible, just like we have established before, right? Now, this would have made the journey safer and especially quicker. Shortly after he leaves to move forward, he falls into a crevice and loses consciousness. Perfect. Only after regaining his senses, he finds himself stuck under a boulder. Now, he does not chop off his leg like Aaron Ralston with a spoon, but trying to release his leg causes him further injuries. Our man here doesn't believe in giving up though, and somehow manages to crawl up and comes out to the surface. He returns to the woman's sled and finds her still alive. At this point, the guilt of leaving her behind captures his soul. He realizes that while fighting for his own survival, he might as well take a chance for hers as well. So with his last energy and remaining bits of hope, he once again continues a journey until his strength finally comes to an end. Only then, he sees a helicopter near them. In an attempt to get their attention, he does something I would have not expected anyone to do, and is probably the last attempt you could come up with. First, he lights his flares, but fails. Out of desperation, he then sets his parka on fire, the only thing keeping him warm and alive, to garner their attention. I mean, if this fails, there is no doubt that he will die a pretty nasty death in a few hours only. This is it, right? There is no going back after such a radical attempt to be rescued. Either the helicopter crew will notice them and carry them to safety, or it's over once and for all. Well, despite all his efforts, the helicopter takes off and disappears. Exhausted, he lies down next to the woman, holds her hand, and waits for death to take them both. Just then, the helicopter arrives in a dramatic fashion and presumably rescues them both. In fact, we don't know actually. It is a little bit of a cliffhanger and we don't get any aftermath story, just like we have not received any sort of explanation why and how Overgard is stranded here. With this, the movie pretty much ends. And for me, well, thanks for watching guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was a great movie to be honest, I can recommend this one. Leave us a comment with suggestions if you have any, and I'll catch you again next week. Take care and binge another one. Peace out.